The Supreme Court this morning heard arguments on what could be one of the most pivotal issues of this new term, LGBTQ workplace rights. Nearly 4 years after the High Court ruled that same-sex couples have the right to get married, and decades after the landmark 1964 Civil Rights Act, this would be Title VII, they're preparing to decide whether it is legal to fire employees on the basis of their sexual orientation. NBC's Justice correspondent Pete Williams joins me now, the first day of oral arguments in this term. Pete, let's talk about this, because this does go back, as I believe, to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and whether gay rights should be covered in the workplace.
It sure does. Title VII of that law made it illegal to discriminate on the job on those now familiar categories of race, national origin, religion, and sex. The question is, does that also include discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and transgender status? Now, Pam Karlan, arguing for a man who was fired in Georgia after he joined a gay softball team, said, yes, this is sex discrimination because he was fired for being a man dating other men, whereas a woman dating other men would not have been fired. So that is the basis of the argument, saying, yes, Title VII does cover sexual orientation. Now, the Trump administration says, no, it doesn't, that when Congress passed the Civil Rights Act 55 years ago, sexual orientation was not on anyone's mind, and a majority of the court seemed to agree with that. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it's also true that when Title VII was passed, nobody was thinking that it covered sexual harassment, and ultimately the court said it did. So the best hope for the people trying to get the Supreme Court to rule this way is that a reading of the law, and this is not a constitutional argument, this is a reading of Title VII, a strict reading, just reading the words, would include sexual orientation. And it may surprise you to know that the best hope for that side of the case may be Neil Gorsuch, because the court appeared pretty evenly divided between liberals and conservatives. But Justice Gorsuch, judging from his questions, seemed to be open to the idea that a textual reading of the law, regardless of what Congress had in mind at the time, just reading the words of the statute, could extend to sexual orientation and also transgender status. 3 cases here today, Andrea, for 2 hours of argument on the second day of the Supreme Court's term.
And Pete, it's so interesting you bring up Justice Gorsuch, because of course he's on the more conservative wing of the court now. A lot can transpire in conference and along the way, but it's fascinating that at least from the questions today, you could infer some open-mindedness there.
So a previous Supreme Court ruling said that a man could sue for sexual harassment even though he was harassed by other men on an all-male oil rig. And the justice who wrote that case said that may not be what Congress had in mind, but he is treated differently than a woman in his situation. That justice who wrote that was Antonin Scalia, who was also a textualist.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.